Every 6 months, another baby was born into their home, and every 6 months, another baby was sold. Kojo and Ajoa, the seemingly perfect couple, had a secret so dark it would shake the very foundations of their lives. What began as a desperate attempt to escape poverty quickly spiraled into a twisted routine, trading the lives of their own children for the wealth they craved. But as their pockets filled with blood money, the walls around them began to close in, and the price of their greed would soon become unbearable. In the heart of a bustling African town, nestled between rows of mud brick houses, lived a seemingly perfect couple, Kojo and Ajoa. They were admired by all who knew them. Kojo, a hard-working farmer, and Ajoa, a devoted wife who kept their modest home immaculate. Their love story was the talk of the town, a tale that began with a whirlwind romance and blossomed into a marriage everyone envied. But behind the smiles and the gentle gestures lay a secret so dark it would send shivers down the spines of those who dared to uncover it. Kojo and Ajoa, beneath their facade of normalcy, were hiding something unimaginable. The day Ajoa discovered she was pregnant was a joyous one. The couple celebrated with their neighbors, throwing a feast that was the talk of the town for weeks. The birth of their son, Kwame, brought even more joy. But it wasn't long before Kojo and Ajoa began to feel the weight of their financial struggles. One evening, as they sat together in their small living room, Kojo turned to Ajoa with a proposition that would change their lives forever. "What if," he began, his voice low, "we found a way to solve our money problems for good?" Ajoa looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean, Kojo?" Kojo hesitated, then spoke the words that would haunt them both. "What if we sold Kwame?" Ajoa gasped, horrified at the suggestion, but as Kojo continued to explain how much money they could make, how their lives could change, she began to see the logic in his twisted plan. The thought of a life without financial worries was too tempting, and before long, they both agreed to go through with it. Kojo made contact with a wealthy couple from a distant city who were desperate for a child. They offered a sum of money that made Kojo and Ajoa's heads spin. It was more than they had ever seen in their lives. On the night of the transaction, Ajoa held Kwame close, tears streaming down her face as she handed him over to the strangers. Kojo looked away, unable to meet her eyes. The couple left with Kwame, and the house that had once been filled with the sound of a baby's laughter was now eerily silent. With the money they received, Kojo and Ajoa transformed their lives. They bought a larger house, finer clothes, and ate meals fit for royalty. But the emptiness in their hearts grew with each passing day. 6 months after Kwame's departure, Ajoa discovered she was pregnant again. This time, there was no celebration. The joy of bringing a child into the world was overshadowed by the dark plan that loomed over them. As the months passed, Kojo and Ajoa fell deeper into their web of lies. They began to distance themselves from their neighbors, avoiding questions about Kwame and the new baby that was on the way. When their daughter Ama was born, there were no visitors, no feast. The couple kept to themselves, knowing what they were about to do. Just as before, Kojo found a buyer, a wealthy businessman who was willing to pay a small fortune for a child. Ajoa's heart broke as she handed over her baby girl, but the weight of the money in her hands made the pain easier to bear. With each child they sold, the couple's wealth grew, but so did their guilt. They began to fight more often, their once perfect marriage slowly unraveling. Kojo turned to alcohol to numb his pain, while Ajoa became more withdrawn, her once bright eyes now dull and lifeless. Their home, once a place of joy, became a prison of their own making. The money that had once brought them happiness now felt like a curse, a constant reminder of the children they had lost. When Adjoa became pregnant for the 4th time, she couldn't bear the thought of going through with the plan again. But Kojo, blinded by greed, insisted they continue. "This is the last one," he promised. Though they both knew it was a lie. The birth of their son, Kofi, brought no joy. Adjoa refused to hold him, knowing she would have to say goodbye too soon. The transaction was arranged and Kofi was taken from them just as the others had been. But this time, something changed in Adjoa. The weight of her guilt became too much to bear, and she fell into a deep depression. She stopped eating, stopped speaking, and spent her days staring blankly at the walls of their once grand home. As Kojo and Adjoa withdrew further into themselves, their neighbors began to grow suspicious. Whispers of the couple's sudden wealth and the mysterious disappearances of their children spread through the town like wildfire. One evening, a group of villagers gathered outside Kojo and Adjoa's home, demanding answers. Kojo tried to dismiss their concerns, but the villagers were relentless. They knew something was wrong, and they were determined to find out what. Kojo and Adjoa's secrets were slowly unraveling, and it was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. One night, unable to sleep, Adjoa wandered through their home, her mind filled with memories of the children they had lost. She found herself in the room that had once been Kwame's nursery, now empty and cold. As she stood there, the weight of her guilt overwhelmed her, and she collapsed to the floor, sobbing. Kojo found her there, and for the first time in months, they spoke openly about the choices they had made. The walls they had built around themselves crumbled, and they were left with nothing but the stark reality of what they had done. "We have to stop," Adjoa whispered, her voice filled with despair. "We can't keep doing this." But Kojo, his heart hardened by years of greed, refused to listen. "It's too late," he said. "There's no going back now." Adjoa's words haunted Kojo, but he was determined to continue. When Adjoa became pregnant for the 5th time, she knew she couldn't go through with it again. But Kojo, driven by his insatiable hunger for wealth, insisted they sell the child. As the birth approached, Adjoa grew more and more distant. She refused to acknowledge the life growing inside her, and when the baby was born, a beautiful boy they named Yor, she felt nothing but emptiness. Kojo made the arrangements. But this time, something went wrong. The buyer, a notorious criminal, double-crossed them. Instead of paying for the child, he kidnapped Yor and demanded more money. Kojo, desperate to get his son back, tried to negotiate, but the criminal had other plans. He saw through Kojo's desperation and realized he could make even more money by blackmailing them. The couple's world came crashing down as the criminal began to extort them for more and more money. Kojo, once so confident in his schemes, was powerless. Their wealth, once a source of pride, was now a target on their backs. Adjoa, broken by the loss of yet another child, finally snapped. She couldn't bear the weight of their sins any longer and decided to confess everything to the authorities. She hoped that by coming clean, they could at least save Yor and put an end to the nightmare they had created. Kojo, on the other hand, refused to give up. He believed he could outsmart the criminal and get their son back without involving the police. But his plans backfired, and he soon found himself caught in a web of deceit and danger that he couldn't escape. The authorities eventually caught wind of the couple's activities, and a full investigation was launched. The truth about Kojo and Ajoa's baby-selling scheme shocked the entire town. The perfect couple, once envied by all, were now pariahs. Kojo was arrested, and Ajoa, broken by grief and guilt, was taken to a mental institution. Their home, once filled with luxury, was seized by the government, and the couple's ill-gotten wealth was confiscated. The villagers, who had once admired Kojo and Ajoa, now looked at them with disgust. The story of the couple who sold their babies became a cautionary tale, a warning about the dangers of greed and the consequences of losing one's humanity. Years passed, and the memory of Kojo and Ajoa faded from the town's collective memory. But the impact of their actions lingered. The children they had sold, scattered across the country, grew up in different homes, unaware of the twisted circumstances of their births. Kojo, serving a life sentence in prison, spent his days in regret, haunted by the faces of the children he had sold. Ajoa, lost in her own mind, never recovered from the trauma of what she had done. She spent the rest of her days in the institution, reliving the horrors of her past. The story of Kojo and Ajoa became a legend, passed down through generations as a warning against the dangers of greed and moral compromise. Parents told the tale to their children, emphasizing the importance of integrity, family, and the heavy price of losing one's soul for wealth. In time, the couple's tragic tale served as a reminder that no amount of money could replace the love and connection that only a family could provide. Their story became a symbol of the consequences of allowing material desires to overshadow the priceless value of human life. But even as the town moved on, the scars of Kojo and Ajoa's actions remained. The community, once tight-knit, had been shaken by the revelation of what their own neighbors were capable of. It took years for the people to trust one another again, and even longer for the town's children, who had grown up hearing the cautionary tale, to fully understand the weight of the choices made by the couple who once seemed to have it all. Many years later, a group of adults began to return to the town, those who had once been sold as infants. Drawn by an inexplicable pull, they came searching for their roots, hoping to uncover the truth about where they had come from. Among them was Yor, the last child Kojo and Ajoa had sold. Now a grown man, Yor had lived a life far different from the one his parents had imagined for him. Raised by the criminal who had abducted him, Yor had faced hardships, but had emerged strong and determined. He had come back not for vengeance, but for answers. As Yor and the others began to piece together the fragments of their past, they discovered the truth about Kojo and Ajoa. They learned of the couple's fate and the lives they had led before and after the transactions. Some felt anger, others sadness, but all shared a sense of loss for the family they never knew. Yor decided to stay in the town, feeling a connection to the place where his life had begun. He took up farming, following in his father's footsteps, but with a heart full of compassion and a desire to heal the wounds left by his parents' actions. Slowly, Yor began to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. He reached out to the other children who had been sold, inviting them to visit and reconnect with their roots. Together, they formed a new kind of family, bound not by blood, but by the shared experience of their past. In time, the town began to heal. The memory of Kojo and Ajoa's misdeeds faded, replaced by the new life and hope that Yor and his siblings brought with them. They became symbols of resilience and the power of redemption, proving that even the darkest chapters of a story could lead to a brighter future. Years later, as Yor sat on the porch of his farmhouse, watching the sunset over the fields. He thought about his parents and the choices they had made. He understood now that their actions had been driven by desperation and greed, but he also saw how those same actions had led to his own journey of self-discovery. Yor had found peace in the knowledge that he had broken the cycle, that he had chosen a different path. He had built a life of honesty and integrity, one that honored the family he had never known, but had come to understand in his own way. And as the town thrived once more, Yor's story became a new kind of legend, a tale of forgiveness, resilience, and the power of love to overcome even the most twisted of beginnings. The town, once marked by the sins of Kojo and Ajoa, was now a place of hope and renewal, where the lessons of the past paved the way for a brighter, better future. And so, the story of Kojo and Ajoa, once a dark and twisted tale of greed and loss, ended with a message of redemption and the enduring strength of the human spirit. A story that reminded all who heard it that even in the face of the greatest despair, there is always a chance for a new beginning.